and the vice mayor. So before we get into the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation, the council is going to have to choose which one of you is going to run the meeting tonight.
I think Mr. Andazola, maybe?
Okay,
I don't think so.
No?
I think I should.
well, here you have it.
Yeah, I got time and grade. I think I should have.
All right.
There you go.
I think you should go sit by that mic.
I think so too.
That mic,
No,
You mean the microphone or?
microphone.
both mics.
So Councilman Lopez will be running the meeting.
Start now. Then we do usually start out with invocation and pledge of allegiance. Does anyone volunteer for either one of those?
I'll just pledge.
Pledge allegiance? Luke, you like the invocation?
Sure.
Okay. Please stand and remain standing. We'll get them both done.
I pledge
Our dear Heavenly Father, we humbly bow our heads and thank Thee for this wonderful opportunity that we get together here this evening to discuss the issues of the city of Safford and the citizens that we watch over. Heavenly Father, we ask Thee to be with all of us that are here tonight, that we'll be able to discuss the issues of recreation in the city of Safford, that we'll be able to open our minds and be able to give input and be able to have this wonderful recreation site for the citizens and be able to utilize it to the best of its ability. Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for all that You give us, and we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. I forgot to say to mute your phones or make them somewhat dormant so they're not disturbing the meeting. This is a work session. There is nothing that takes action in the work session. However, we can suggest, and certainly this is to give guidance, because we've been waiting a long time, and it's time for guidance to come forward. I hope that everybody speaks up. Everybody takes a chance to make their views. I would like to speak freely in the meeting because it is a work session, but if I get out of hand, I'll correct myself. And we'll try to keep it in order. So I believe this, I don't believe there's any citizen comments
There are none on either.
and/or citizen comments on non-agenda items, which is none. So we move to 7, Discovery Park Boulevard, and I don't see a name of a staff member in charge of that. Is
Well,
there
I'll
one?
have a few opening comments and then I'll lay out a little bit what we're gonna do. The folks that are here from Kinley Horn. So, obviously, we've been working for quite a while on getting public input for developing parks. The council created the Parks and Rec Committee some time ago. They had given us quite a bit of feedback on 2 locations. We decided on one. They combined many of the amenities in that area, gave us feedback on that. So we then went forward and we did hire Kinley Horn to come in and do design for us. So staff has been meeting with them for several weeks. We came up with several designs which are behind you, so there's 3 designs back there. And again, those designs were predicated on a number of issues, basically some of the amenities that the committee had recommended, and also some of the restrictions that are inherent within the site itself physically, or there are easements there with gas lines and the like. So we tried to, well, they tried to design around some of those limitations. So the goal tonight is, we are now bringing together both the committee that provided the original feedback. Council now is finally getting a chance to come back to the table on it. So what we would like to have happen, what we'll start off with is Rebecca's going to give a presentation. She's going to outline some of the feedback we got from the public. She'll talk about some of the designs. And then at that point, we can open it up to council. Now, if we want to, after that, if you want to take a look at what's behind you, you can do that, we can take a break and let you mill around and look at the different designs and then come back to the table. But at that point, once she's done giving her presentation, Councilman Lopez, I'll turn it back over to you, and then you can proceed as you see fit. So at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Rebecca and let her introduce her staff, and then she's going to provide the presentation.
Hey, John, do you care if I just jump in with a quick comment? So just so you guys, for your guys' understanding and stuff too, we've done a lot of work to kind of get here. This process is still kind of malleable at this point. If you guys see something, if you feel something needs to be tweaked or moved, it can easily happen at this point as we continue to dive down deeper into this and we make decisions in the not too distant future. It's gonna be a lot harder. So let it be known tonight to kind of iterate what Mr. Lopez has said. Now's the time to say it because we don't want to hold back. Once we start in the design process, it's gonna be a lot harder, a lot more costly to go down that road. So tonight's the night. If you guys want to say something.
And this is just on Discovery Boulevard and 8th Avenue, not El Paso.
Correct.
That subject matters that, okay.
All right, well, thank you. Hopefully you all can hear me okay. The microphone's working all right. Thank you all for having us here this evening. We really appreciate the chance to come before all of you and talk to you about our process that we've gone through thus far with the park. My name's Rebecca Field. I'm a landscape architect with Kimley Horn. I've been in the park and recreation business for close to 20 years now, so I'm very excited to have the chance to work with you all in this really important park for the city of Safford. With me, I have two of our team members with Kimley Horn. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Melinda Pittman. I work with Rebecca Field. We've been working together for 4.5 years now, but really happy to be here.
And I'm Kevin Payne. I'm a civil engineer in Arizona, and I've worked with Rebecca for 10 years and been in the industry for also almost 20 and worked with her on a lot.
So I made sure to bring our civil engineer along with our designer, because they've had an integral role in developing the concepts. We're going to go into an overview of the project, how we got to this point, including the community outreach, amenities, theming. We're going to talk about constraints, and that's where the engineering side really comes into it, because this is a site that has some significant constraints, and we'll go through that. And then we'll review the concepts that we've generated to date with a lot of input thus far from the community and from staff. And we'd like to have a discussion on those concepts and hear your thoughts and your comments about the direction that they're heading. So that being said, just going into an overview of the project. So as you all know, we're here today to talk about the new park that's going to be at 8th and Discovery Park Boulevard. This will be an approximately 15-acre city park. It's a tremendous opportunity for the city of Safford to create a really meaningful recreation space for the community. The main amenities that will be included in the park, and this is based on input from the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, are an amphitheater, a splash pad, pickleball courts, playground equipment areas, and a pinchless zip line. If you're not familiar what a pinchless zip line is, it's something that you can hang on and swing down, and we'll show you a picture of that here in a bit. So these were the 5 amenities that we knew going into the project were the top priorities. There are other amenities too that are being explored for inclusion in the park, such as a food truck court will of course need parking to support these amenities, ramadas, lighting, turf, picnic areas, workout stations, possibly a water feature, and then also a game area. So the image there with the 2 blue shade structures, that's the pinchless zip line, and these are just some images of some of the top amenities that we anticipate will be included in the park. So to give you an overview on the project schedule and how this process is unfolding, we started out with project initiation, which was a kickoff meeting. We had data collection, site analysis phase, where we did a survey of the site. So we had a surveyor come out and take some shots and make sure that we understood what was happening with the site itself. We also have a geotechnical engineer as part of our team, and we're looking heavily at the utilities and how that's going to relate to the site. We are currently in the master plan portion of this project, where we're working with you all to develop the right plan for the site that has all of the amenities that the community is interested in. And right now we're at 2.3 in this task list of the project, which is the workshop meeting where we're describing the initial concepts. Once we get your feedback, we're going to turn that into a master plan, and that's gonna be for the full site with all of the amenities that the community would like to see. We're gonna take that plan and we're going to develop preliminary plans for it. We call that 30% plans, but that's just another way of saying preliminary plans. It's gonna be for the whole site, for all of the improvements, and it's gonna show what the placement is of these different elements and how they relate to each other. Sure.
You said after tonight, we're gonna make some of those decisions?
We're gonna start working towards a master plan. So we have 3 concepts right now, and we're gonna get input from you all and then develop another plan which we'll come back to you with before we move into any further
Yeah, because
design.
we haven't even walked the area either,
Okay,
because that could change the direction of the amphitheater on the sun. There could be some changes there because we haven't walked it.
got it. And we'll talk about some of those constraints. We've looked at that quite a bit. We've talked about sun angles and things like that as well, so we'll get into that. So that preliminary phase of plans is, again, for the whole site, and that's, keeping in mind all the different amenities that fit on the site. Once we have that plan in place, we're going to develop a detailed cost estimate that's going to tell us how much all of that's gonna cost. We know there are certain budget constraints up front, so we're going to identify what those top priorities are on that site and then take those amenities into full construction documents. And that's the 60, 90, and final plans that will be prepared. So that can be a bit confusing if you're not familiar with the construction process, but what we're saying here is we're gonna make sure you have a plan for the full site so that we know where everything fits, and then we are gonna figure out what we can afford, and then we're going to plan for that for construction. Does that make sense, or does anyone have questions on that process?
Yeah, but you kind of hesitated with water amenities a little bit. You said that under your breath. Is there some reason for that?
So it's not currently showing in any of our plans, like a water feature like a fountain.
Oh, fountain.
That's
I
what
thought
that
we were talking
means.
Splash pad there for a minute.
Splash pad is a different thing.
Okay,
Water
'cause
feature is like a fountain, and so we're not showing that in any concept right now, but it could be there, it could not. That's why it's kind of a
All right, I
lesser
feel
amenity.
better.
Okay, good. Splash pad's a given. Splash
Okay.
pad's one of the top 5. We're doing that. Once we have those final sealed plans for what we can afford, then we're going to go into bidding and construction. So that's the sequence of events of this process. And again, we're still early. We'll have multiple checkpoints with you guys to make sure we're heading in the right direction. We want to make sure this is a plan that you all feel comfortable with and that the public feels comfortable with too. So as far as community outreach, we were in this room a couple months ago where we did talk to the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, and we also had some members of the public join us. We showed a lot of different images of amenities that this park could feature. We had, at that meeting on May 2nd, 17 people signed in. We got feedback from them on what types of amenities they wanted to see in the park and what their preferences were as far as visual appearance of some of these features and what types of things the community really wanted to have. Each person got 6 votes. We gave them little stickers, and they had the opportunity to place stickers on the amenities that they liked the most. And you can see there some of the input that we received. This is also combined with additional outreach that your staff did. These boards were up in the library. People had the chance to come in and put their dots down. And again, everyone just got 6. So where you see the dots, people had to focus on that because there were definitely more than just these 2 boards. We had 6 boards that people could put dots on, and you can see, and we'll show you the results of that here in just a minute, where people really focus their attention. We also did a radio show on June 5th. It was a Voice of the Valley show to try to get the word out and try to get some interest going for the park. Any questions about this process? So we'll show you some of the results. So when we talked about inclusive play spaces, this is one of those top 5 amenities that we know is going to be in the park. We showed different pictures and different types of equipment. And you can see we had some pretty strong preferences. The purple is the adults on this chart. The dark blue are teens. The light blue are children, and then the green are City of Safford employees. So we took a lot of this data into consideration when we were developing the concepts, because some of the features, like this picture on the bottom, was the most highly rated image of the ones that we presented. And we took kind of the footprint of what a space like this looks like and made sure that that fits on the site. So that's how we took the data from the public and incorporated it into these designs that we're going to show you today. So I'll flip through these just so you can see. The splash pad had a lot of votes. You can see the totals as I'm flipping through this. And again, we can give, you have this information, you can look through it in more detail, but there were definitely preferences that people had where they put more of their stickers than others. And these top 5 amenities were the ones that they really tended to focus on. In this case, the splash pad with nature-inspired toys was a top choice. So when we're looking at the splash pad design for this park, we're looking at something that may be a little more nature-inspired than some of the other traditional splash pads that you see with the buckets and the big toys. The community has indicated that they like the natural look, and so we're exploring that further.
One of the things I liked about, well, I know there's a picture in the wall, was keeping control of the kids. Because so they can't sneak off, because like Thatcher, they can walk off into the road.
Right.
And get away, you know, when people aren't paying attention. So that kind of seemed like it kept them channeled in the area.
Sure, yeah, that's a good design detail on there for sure. And I think we've visited the Thatcher splash pad just to take a look and make sure that this one is next level from that. So, so that's what we've been looking at. But, you know, the Thatcher splash pad has a lot of the traditional toys. We showed those images, and that really wasn't what people gravitated towards. You can see our results for the different demographics. The kids did like a lot of the toys, but overall, the focus was on a more natural, more intuitive play space than the prescribed features that they have at other splash pads. So we think that's very exciting and really on par with what the trends are in recreation anyway, to go more towards that natural style play. So this is something that will be different and will be very unique and fun for the community.
And where the pumps station is and the retrieve, because the smell of that chlorine can run some people off.
Yeah, so, you know, the design of this is where we're gonna definitely get into the details of how the sanitation happens, where that pump is, where everything is getting circulated. It is gonna be a recirculating system, but we'll have to make sure that that's all addressed.
Okay.
So here's another one on the pinchless zip line. This one, what we heard from this message was the shade is important, and of course it is because we're in Arizona. So, you know, having some structures with some shade, having multiple opportunities for people to race each other, that was a top priority for the community. So our concepts reflect that. All 3 of them have these elements in them in different configurations. So what you're seeing here is represented in all 3. It's just how they're placed on the site. As far as the amphitheater, this one was pretty clear in favor of this image that you see on the bottom right. This was by far the top choice. You can see in the charts there. So messaging on this is lawn space, shade trees, and you'll see that reflected on all concepts as well.
So as far as size of the amphitheater, what are you projecting size-wise for people that can actually attend within that part of the facility?
Sure.
Is it going to be seating for 500 or 1,000?
500 is what we planned for.
Okay.
So spatially, we have it set for about 500. You'll see that there's more room that could be bigger if there was a desire for that, but we were looking at about 500 people.
And some of the seating can be along this wall and the other is with bring your chairs?
Sure. So when we get into the concepts, you'll see that what's happening here is it's just some tiered lawn areas and little concrete strips where people can walk or sit. In most of these concepts that we're showing, we have a bit of lawn even beyond that. So even beyond the 500 that we've officially slated for within the amphitheater, there's space for picnic blankets and chairs and things like that. So there's more room in a couple of these concepts for something like that to occur.
sometimes you just have to tell me it's coming.
It's coming over.
Okay.
So one thing that we had discussed too, and I noticed a change, and I heard there were some drainage issues down towards where the parking is. Because originally when we sat down in our group, we thought that the amphitheater, you'd basically be facing north if you were on the bandstand, and you're facing south if you're sitting there and observing, so you're not worried about sunrise or sunset. And we had discussed that at length. I'm just kind of curious, with the flood zone, if the parking lot is where the flood zone is now, can you still flip it the other way, or does it have to go that way? Because I envisioned with the ground going up to the cemetery, that some of that could be used for additional seating and areas for people to kind of get up above where the concert is. So I'm just kind of curious why it ended up being back on the north side, and the people would be sitting south of the bandstand at this point, the amphitheater.
Sure. So the main reason for that was sun orientation. So for visitors, or for people, spectators, I should say, we want them facing north because of the sun in their faces. And so what we're doing is making sure people are facing the best way they can. That's a general design standard for amphitheaters, is to make sure that people are facing north. There are some drainage constraints, and I do have a slide that shows some of those specific points. You'll see in some of the concepts, we played with the amphitheater a little bit. We had it, honestly, even on the other side of the channel, and then there were a lot of reasons why that wasn't gonna work. So we made sure that we explored these options, and then at the end, where the amphitheater is pretty much where it needs to be from a drainage and grading perspective. So feasibility-wise, we looked at that pretty heavily.
One of the other discussion points that we had is when you think about people coming in late, if we're orientated the other way, you're gonna be walking through the band shell to find seating through everybody. And so if you orientate it that way, there's a little bit of a logistical problem trying to get people in and out.
We also
If you
had
flip the
an
other way,
issue with
they-
that gas line in that corner with the structure being in that easement. We couldn't push that corner like we wanted to originally in our first discussions.
Makes sense. So one thing me and Lance talked about earlier too was if moving the bandstand or the shell to that side, then you have to have access with people and trucks to
Yes.
drive. So you could actually use the bike trail along the ditch there, the canal, whatever you want to call it, to drive up to where they could be close enough to hand truck or roll all of their equipment. I mean, this guy knows, he does that stuff all the time, where you have to be able to get the equipment there.
Yes.
They're not gonna lug it from the parking lot.
That was definitely a consideration, and the way these are designed is to utilize that pedestrian bridge as that mechanism. There's two ways. So there's the parking, but there's also, when we look at it, the bridge is a pretty direct access, and that bridge will be sufficient to have like you said, a hand truck or something like that to go over it.
I just think if you can use that to let them drive and have them enough space at the bandstand or the shell where they can back up to
Just
it,
back in.
unload, because they got, tower
Sure,
speakers and
sure.
all their other gear that they have to put out there. So, anyways, just thought,
Yeah, thank you. We'll look at that together here in a bit, and you can
Okay.
see what you think about how the circulation is. Any other comments on the amphitheater? This was a big design feature because it took the most space. It took a lot of consideration, and I would say of all the features, this is the one we messed with the most. And in the end, it ended up being pretty much in the same spot, slid up and down a little bit, but pretty similar because of all the constraints that we were just going through. Not, I'll go to the next one. Pickleball courts, another one of our top amenities. We definitely saw shade as a big necessary component. So the image there at the bottom was the highest ranked image. It has the pickleball courts with some associated shade structures, and you'll see that in the concept. So there's ramadas that are right next to the pickleball so that people can utilize the shade and then play on the courts. As far as other shade structures, we did show different pictures of small ramadas, large ramadas, just to get a sense of what people liked and the visual preference. This one was highly rated as a small group ramada, and then we also had a pretty large amount of votes for large gathering and picnic ramadas. A lot of people, you can see there that the adults really preferred these structures and wanted them more than the kids did, but these are necessary pieces of a park, so we wanted to make sure to have those scattered throughout all the concepts, and you'll see both large and small ramadas in the concepts that we're gonna present. A food truck court was another amenity. This wasn't one of the top 5, but it was one that had a lot of interest. So you can see by the votes there, if you look on the side, there's 18. So we got 18 votes, and again, thinking of the number of votes everyone got, this was a pretty good number of people that had some preferences towards food truck courts. This image on the bottom right was the highest rated option, and it shows a kind of a plaza area with a shade canopy element. So some of our concepts have something similar to this. Another one of them is less formal, but we do have a space for a food truck court in the design. A lot more people than we expected voted on the bridge. We didn't expect to see any votes on it, but we did. The kids love the bridge. So you can see the kids were the ones that really put their votes in there. This is the image that they like the best, but we know we're gonna have a bridge. This was more of a, kind of a gauge to see what preferences were aesthetically. And we were surprised to see so many kids vote in favor of a bridge. Some other amenities that we looked at and that we asked for feedback on was FitCore, which is the activity shown in the picture. It's kind of like a extreme course kind of thing, a parkour course. We also asked about social gathering space, smart infrastructure, and a bike repair station. By far, the FitCore and the social gathering spaces were the preferences, and so we do have a FitCore area in all 3 concepts as well. And then lastly, we talked about design theme opportunities, because again, this is going to be a signature park for the city of Safford, and we have the opportunity, because it's a site that has a lot of potential, to develop a theme and really lean into that theme as we get into the design. So we looked at 4 different theming types. We looked at the river, we looked at the Sky Island concept, agriculture, and also mountains. And if you were here at the last meeting, there seemed to be a preference for the Sky Island or kind of the mountain theme, but then we had a lot of input later on that the river theme was of interest to a lot of the adults in the community. So what this shows us is that, you know, we have mountain, river as our top 2 choices, but really all 4 of these work together because those all make up what Safford is. And so we can bring in a lot of these elements and create our own theme for the park, but the mountain theme and the river theme were definitely the highest ranked. And then this is just a kind of a composite of all the top rated images. So this gives you a flavor of where the park design is heading and what some of the features could look like. So natural surfacing, shade trees in the amphitheater, lots of shade, and then some fun opportunities to incorporate some of those themes. So that was the fun part. We wanted to get into some of the constraints now and some of the challenges that the site has, because there are quite a few. One of the big ones is that there's a big gas easement that runs down the site. So in this picture, these are from our survey files, so they are a bit messy, but these are the data that we've been looking at. The thick yellow, see if my cursor will go to it, it won't. The thick yellow bar that's running down the map there on the left, that's where the easement is. So that's a big gas line. We can't build any permanent structures over it. We can put pavement, we can put turf, we can put asphalt, but we would not want to put a playground, we would not want to do a structure, anything permanent that couldn't be easily fixed. So you can fix concrete, you can fix turf, but you're not going to fix a structure. So when looking at the site, that's a significant area there that had to be worked around with all these features that we're talking about to make sure that we are respecting that easement and staying out of it, so that if something comes up with the line, it can be dealt with. Drainage was another one. The image on the right shows, if you can see, 3 kind of dark red circles. Those are the key drainage spots on the site where we needed to pay attention to what was happening, make sure we're avoiding impacts to those locations to avoid significant costs as far as drainage infrastructure. And what these resulted in, and that circle in yellow is where the amphitheater was optimally placed. So in the concepts, you'll see them, again, in that similar spot because we're keeping in mind the drainage considerations for the site. Amenity sizes was another thing. So when we look at the amphitheater for 500 people, that takes up a footprint. So we want to make sure that we have the space for that. The pickleball courts take up a good amount of room. Those are our two bigger amenities. And so we needed to make sure they fit appropriately on the site with all of the other issues that we were talking about as far as the utilities and the drainage. Sun orientation was definitely a consideration when we're looking at this, as we already talked about. So for the amphitheater, we wanted to make sure that we had the right orientation for it so that people are viewing the performances as comfortably as they can. Vegetation was another one. I don't know that that's a constraint, but it's something that we needed to consider. There's a lot of vegetation on the site, especially on the eastern half. So if we want to preserve some of that, we looked at that in some concepts and others we didn't, so we can talk about how you feel about that as well. Earthwork and cost, just looking at how this is actually going to be constructed and what kind of costs are going to come into play was something that we were thinking about when we were doing the design, because we wanted to minimize the amount of earthwork that's needed, because that's going to be a big cost item for you in the future. So based on those constraints, we started developing these bubble diagrams. So I'm going to walk you through quickly what this is, and then we'll get into the three concepts. So the one on the left was the first iteration, and those bubbles that you're seeing are different footprints for the amenities. So the amphitheater is the light green one. That's a big area that we wanted to make sure we were planning for. Before we received the survey and really had a good sense of what exactly the drainage was doing, we explored having some of the amenities on that side of the park, but looking at it further and talking it through with our engineers, we refined it to remove some of those other amenities. The purple is parking, the purple food truck court. The red is the fit core areas. So we had thought about putting them on that side, but then with the drainage issues, we went ahead and moved them back over to the west side. So you can see that shift. The light gray is parking, and then the light orange is Ramada space. And so we took these concepts, we showed our stakeholder group and our committee these different iterations, and then started developing line drawings to kind of look at the circulation. And then what that turned into is the concept that we're saying is concept 1. That you see on the boards behind you. I'll walk you guys through this one and just kind of talk through where all these pieces are. And again, once we're done, we can go to the back and we can talk about them in more detail. But concept 1 has a large combined splash pad and play area. A is Ramadas. So as you're looking at the top right, you can see the key there. So where you see an A, those are Ramada areas. There's more than just the A that we're showing. But the brown boxes are shade structures, and again, when we're in the back, we can look at that closer together. B is a splash pad, so that's that upper blue circle. C is the natural playground. And then J, that is the fit core.
Space.
And so we have those spaces all together. We have D as the parking, and then looking at that easement, we have the easement that runs through there, and you can see what's on top of it is parking, lawn, and concrete, and that's it. So you wouldn't know the easements there if you didn't see it drawn on the page. We wanted it to be very inconspicuous, that there's a big constraint running down the site, but it works well. It created this nice big open space, open lawn area, which is E. K is the food truck area, so it's right off the parking off of 8th Avenue. F is the pickleball courts, and then G is that pedestrian bridge that takes you over the wash to the amphitheater area with additional parking and trails as well. So what we're showing to the right, where you see some of those trees come through, those are the existing trees that could stay in place as part of this concept. So we're in this iteration, we're keeping a lot of the existing vegetation. managing the vegetation elsewhere on the site, adding back shade trees, those are all the green circles, and then really creating a nice parking opportunity on both sides so that people can access both sides of the park amenities. In this case, we do have access from the parking to the stage area, so you can get to it from the parking along Discovery. And then also there's direct access from the parking along 8th as well if you use the bridge.
So do you have a breakdown of approximately how many spots are in each parking lot, just out of curiosity? How many vehicles you can,
Yeah, this one was at, I think it was 111.
each one or total?
This particular
Those two together?
concept
Yeah,
together
those two
was
together.
111,
Gotcha. Okay.
yes. Yes.
Along those lines too, part of that design too is that food truck, that's actually gonna go either way. If there's food trucks on there, awesome. If not, it can secondary it.
Additional parking, okay.
So, this one with the existing pathway that you have, it does continue down the site similar to what it does now. We scooted it out a little bit right where the bridge is because the bridge is gonna need some space to kind of touch down after crossing the bridge, but generally the path alignment stays, and then you can see on the right side where it hooks back into your existing path. So we're maintaining that access. There's another concept that changes that access a bit, but this one pretty much keeps it as is. And again, some of the constraints that we're looking at spatially, the pickleball court, you'll always see it in that kind of bottom corner because that's where it fits with the utility easement and all the other things going on. And the amphitheater is always on the east side of the wash.
So, question about the pickleball courts.
Sure.
What is the intended parking lot then? Because if it's the lower one, they're gonna have to go out and around to cut across Discovery Park Boulevard to get to it, or they're gonna be in the other one up above. It's, I mean, it is what it is, but
Right, yeah,
there's nothing really there for that, and that's something that people will use probably every day.
Sure.
So that K area that wouldn't, so obviously for
Same
those
thing,
uses, it's
food
gonna
truck.
be- It wouldn't be food trucks at that time, they could park as close as they could on that spot.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the K, the image there at the bottom of the food truck alley, that was the highest rated image from the community. It shows a little bit more formal space there, but it really could become, flexible parking, whatever, makes the most sense as we get further into it. But that proximity obviously is very convenient to the pickleball court.
Well,
That's where it
because
is.
people are gonna do what's easiest.
Yes.
Whether it's in the,
Walk to the pickleball.
I know. Hey, Lance, believe me, I know, but they'll be pulling up, see that tree number 1 or 2 right next to F there on the west side? They're gonna be parking right in the trees, so I'm just being honest.
Yeah. No, I mean, access control is a big deal with parks.
Yeah. Yep.
So this one has, some nice trail areas that kind of take you right next to the existing vegetation. As I mentioned, the brown squares are structures. I'll point out the restroom on this one. It's up, I had a pointer, it's up there by B, which is the splash pad. It's the brown structure right there. So we wanted to make sure there is a restroom near the splash pad. That's a code requirement. So you'll see in another concept, some have 2 restrooms, but this one has 1.
So with having the ability to have concerts and different things going on down there, we really, and I think Lance explained that there was no plumbing or no sewer on that side, so it has to be on the other side of the walking bridge. So you probably better have one right there. If you're
Yeah.
gonna have a concert, I mean, otherwise people will be going elsewhere.
Right, and one of our concepts does have a restroom there. So those are the kind of tweaks and the changes. Like if we are set that we want 2 restrooms, then we'll make sure that those 2 restrooms go into the final.
Yeah, you really need it,
Yeah.
I think.
Cool.
If you're gonna have say hypothetically 500
Absolutely.
people, otherwise you're gonna have to force every concert promoter to have
I think if
porta
a
potties.
large event like that, we'd have to do
Porta
pots
pots.
or something.
Yep.
If we're bringing on that many people, and we could put that on the south end.
Yeah, just plan on that ahead of time.
So that's the other thing with parking is if you do have a large event, this isn't gonna cover it. And so we know that, and we don't wanna overpark the site for events, but we wanna make sure there's ample parking for the functions that happen day to day. We've talked about event overflow parking that may happen elsewhere. So recognizing that's a challenge, we want to balance putting too much parking versus not enough parking, but we want to meet it in the middle somewhere,
Yeah,
so.
the cemetery though, right there along Discovery Park Boulevard, and I was telling Lance that earlier, people park there anyways in the dirt, there's plenty of room.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of good overflow parking all the way up to the little school up there.
Sure, sure.
So you can fit a lot of cars up there.
So, one last comment on this, the splash pad, as I mentioned, all of the images that people liked can happen in all three concepts. So what really we're asking for today is input like 1 or 2 restrooms. You'll see the splash pad move, the location of some of these amenities, the consideration of keeping existing vegetation or maybe not keeping existing vegetation. When we get further into the concepts, we'll look at that. So those are the things that we have lots of flexibility on, and we'd love your input on it. But all of them will have the pickleball, they'll all have splash pads, all of those amenities are in each of them. It's just where we arrange them is where the differences are. So I'll go ahead and go into concept 2. Again, I won't walk through the whole process, but it's where we're starting to look at different bubbles and different locations and beginning to think, well, what if the splash pad were further south? So when we get into this concept 2, you can see B is south of the parking lot that we're including there on 8th Avenue. This one shows a less formal food truck area. This one truly does integrate it with the parking. If there are food trucks, they can be in those areas, but for the most of the time, it really does look like a parking lot. This one has the trail rerouted. So once you cross the bridge, which is again G, into the amphitheater space, there's a kind of a pedestrian node or kind of an area there where people can gather, and then you'd hook back up to the right, and the path takes you on the side of the park rather than through it. So that's a key difference on this one. Is if you look at H there where some of the ramadas are, the walking path is on the far east side. And then there's a pretty significant buffer in this concept of existing vegetation to remain. This one has a big lawn area south of the Ramada. The other one did not. It had more natural landscaping, but this one has a pretty significant lawn area. We still, because of that gas line, we have lawn, big open space lawn area on the west. We have our pickleball right off that lawn space. And then in this one, the J is the fit core that's right south of the pickleball court area. In this one, we're separating fit core from the play areas. Sometimes those are different users. You have more teenagers versus children, so we split that use group up a little bit. The restroom on this one is K. It's right by where we have K labeled, so the restroom is next to the splash pad, right by where we have that K feature on here. This concept has some, again, the ramadas placed in lawn areas. There's a ramada area up to the north of the existing parking. And I want to say the parking count on this one is somewhere around, I think it was like 124. So a little bit more parking than the previous concept.
And I guess as she's working through this, one of the things to keep in mind, so there's 2 predominant areas level we can jump in. And there's one that kind of comes up at Natural Vineyards here on the east side, but it kind of goes up towards the H approach on that kind of easterly side. And then the event that we get a lot of water, it's actually going to cut across that right in the front. So if we're not careful or have to open up that drainage, those are the 2 flow areas that we're going to see right now. That's why you'll see in all 3 of these things, they're kind of all similar on that side of it, just because of the flow pattern.
Right, yeah, so in this one, the flow would be running through the lawn. In the previous concept, that was more of a landscaped area, but there needs to be a gap between the parking and the amphitheater to allow for that drainage to move through there. So we also have the drainage on the north, and that's why that amphitheater location is fairly well locked in. We don't want to go too far north because then we're really impacting some drainage, and it's going to get costly if we go up further.
Is there, continuous maintenance on that drainage? I mean, as far as the little wash, is there things that you all have to do, or it just kind of keeps itself clean? Because why I'm bringing it up, certain times of the year it runs.
So right now, obviously, we're not doing anything. It is an area that can get flooded and use the irrigation in there. Once we get our park and the design of that, it may be something that we'll have to incorporate going forward.
Well, I'm talking about the wash. I'm talking about the wash.
Yeah, we just keep the weeds sprayed and burned out of it.
'Cause
Wash itself.
What I'm thinking, it runs well past a storm, or, you know, when there's, you know, snow melt, maybe a little short fence for some of the little younger runners that get going, something to slow them down, on both sides, maybe would be something we should probably think about
I know we talked about
for
it.
safety.
We talked
Okay.
about kind of even to Mr. Lopez's point about when we talk about the splash pad being up there, because it will be next to it. Like you said, it's gonna be summertime monsoons, and so we can use some of that rock foundation to block them in and stuff like that. So I know it's.
All along
like
it.
The whole thing, yeah, we can look at all of that, so that'll be some of the finer details when this gets started.
Okay.
So one of the other key differences that I'll point out on this, with the splash pad being on the south end, the way this is designed is the splash pad is separated from the playground space. And the previous one we looked at, it was splash pad and then play all kind of went together. This one has playground with an open lawn space and then the splash pad. It's more closely associated with the pickleball area and the fit court. So again, looking at placement and just how it works on the site, and knowing we have to get sewer, we need the infrastructure, so that's why it's all staying on that west side. But it can really move between the location we're showing now or then further north on the site like the previous concept. So I'll move. Any other questions on this one? So concept 3 was one where we, again, we started to look at other options. This is in the bubble concept on the left. This was where we actually looked at the amphitheater on the west side as just a thought, because we wanted to explore every possible placement to make sure we are making the right choices. It didn't work for several reasons. You know, that gas easement is right there, and then just given the restrictions that we have on the east side with the drainage, it made more sense to put that big open lawn space there on that east side. So we refined that and then created the sketch that you see on the right, which then turned into our concept 3 that explores a little bit of a difference in the parking treatment, and it also explores possibly removing more of the existing vegetation to make it a more manicured landscape and something that's a little more refined on that east side. So in this concept, we have, again, a combined splash pad and play area. This does have the most parking from the other concepts. I think this one was somewhere around 134, somewhere around there. So not a huge jump, but more. You can see that this parking area along Discovery is actually a double stacked parking. It would be a tiered parking arrangement because of the topography. So that is gonna be a little more costly, but it does add more parking. So that's a difference in this concept. This one also has the amphitheater with a nice lawn area further south of it to accommodate that drainage, but also allow for overflow seating if someone wanted to sit in that space. H is where all the walking trails are. We have large and small ramadas along there as well. And we have our walking path that continues in the same way that it does today, where it goes down the channel, crosses in the front, and then runs further east. On the west side, we have our pickleball courts in the same spot, pretty similar, a little less paving around this one. We have our fit core, which is closely associated with the pickleball courts. Again, looking at more older users, so pickleball, teens, and then the kid area, which is the playground and splash pad, totally separated with the lawn. So that's a key feature of this one. And then the food truck court is smaller than concept 1. It's still more formal than concept 2, but it's kind of in between. So it has a smaller footprint, but creates that space similar to that image that everyone really was drawn to that we showed the public. Other features with this one, you know, it has a bit more separation with the play area. There's kind of the older kid play area, and then the younger kid play area with the fit core have some separation to them as well, or sorry, with the zip lines. So there's a lot more kind of niches in this concept. This is the one that has 2 restrooms, so where the bridge is, there's a restroom right next to it, and then there's a restroom way at the top by the splash pad as well. So this is the option that has 2.
So I won't tell you which one my favorite is, but this one's mine. I guess just for transparency in this whole thing, right? So I know there's been a lot of conversation and stuff about keeping some of the native mesquite trees in there, which we can do. If the direction we want to go, we can absolutely do it. Just be aware that that is a pretty invasive plant here in Arizona, and so when we talk about putting some of the grass and turf next to it or making some open green spaces, it will challenge us to keep that alive, fresh and healthy and stuff if we want that keeping a lot of that mesquite in that area.
I agree to that, because also they have big thorns, and the thorns on the grass are not gonna be nice, and then the beans that fall, and keeping those all maintained, so I think that's definitely a challenge, although the natural shade is very nice and beautiful, but maybe not that specific tree.
And I guess in the concept, and when these guys are doing all of this, right, it's not just to strip it out and just make it dirt and just make it everything else. You can see what they're proposing is putting some more natural trees, vegetation back in there, some non-invasive. We'll come up with whatever that looks like in the future, but we'll replace whatever we put in there, if that's the concept that you guys want.
What are some other thoughts on the concept? So these are all 3. They're all in the back as well. I can wrap up and then we can go to the back and talk more about them, or if we want to have the discussion now, that's good. I can quickly go over what our next steps are. So when we get your feedback on these, we'll take the feedback and develop a master plan that will then come back in front of you all to show you what we've come up with and how we've synthesized all your thoughts into this master plan. We'll want to get your input, of course, on that and just see how it's going, and if we need to make changes, we'll absolutely do that. Once we have the master plan, we'll develop a preliminary construction cost estimate, just so we can start getting a sense of what kind of costs we're looking at. And then once we're all in agreement with that, we'll develop those preliminary plans for the whole site that we're calling 30% plans, but again, it's for the whole site. So those are our next pieces, and I think now what we'd really love to hear is your feedback and kind of your preferences on some of the different thoughts that we've shared this evening.
Well, I like the most shade we can get. It's not gonna hurt me to get rid of some of them mesquite trees down there and plant some others that, work right, like Nora said, that aren't gonna drive us crazy. 2 restrooms on this last one and 1 on the other. We didn't have as good a parking for the pickleball area. It wasn't as accessible on any of the parking. I guess they'll figure that out.
We can look at that comment for sure and see what we can do to address that.
And then
prohibitive to have 2 bridges?
I would say each bridge could be about, what, 150?
Yeah.
150,000. So that's what we're looking at. We can do it.
Well, I'm just wondering, as long as this is having more than 1 access point, I mean, certainly if we're talking about accessing pickleball and not having people wandering out into the road or something, it seems like a natural to have some kind of crossing there. Again, it just seems like, because of the familiarity of it, that having more than 1 crossover might not be.
I think we can integrate that into, as we develop Discovery Park Boulevard, and widen that across and have a sidewalk that comes across there with Discovery Park Boulevard.
I think we should have some other secondary access point.
The challenge with a pedestrian bridge, for example, in this concept, is that gas easement. So we wouldn't be able to do a bridge in that easement. And that's where, if we're looking at Discovery Park and making improvements on that kind of circulation pattern up to the pickleball, that could definitely work. The easement restricts where we can do the bridge. I think that bridge location is about as south as we can get it.
So Lance, you're saying basically have almost like sidewalk
Yeah,
access.
well, as we develop Discovery and basically match the primary rec, you know, 20 Avenue, all the way up and around, but as we widen that, develop that, eventually we'll have a sidewalk that's better across that current crossing. Now, that's not gonna happen with this project, obviously, but eventually we could have a sidewalk right along the curb and that sidewalk across.
Yeah, because I think given the length of this project, I think you're gonna wanna have more than one access point to cross.
How do you all feel about the food truck court in particular? Do you like the option of it being kind of flexible parking in
Yeah.
off times? Okay,
Yes.
so less formal, more options.
And you'd never told us how many food trucks it could handle.
So the little white squares are actually food trucks. So we did look at the size of theirs. So this one has 4.
Covered with the K covered.
Yeah, the K kind of blocks our view, your view there, yes. So this one also has 4. And then the first one that we had has 6.
I think it should have.
And Lance, our sewage and water is going out to 8th Avenue.
It's gonna come up 8th Avenue, our sewer's gonna come up 8th Avenue, and eventually we're gonna plan for that to cruise across the wash and get up and continue south, that's the idea. is have it-
Continue south,
Not with this, but we wanna have it designed where we can get under the wash and continue south, if we annex south of Discovery.
and would be out of the gas area with that
We'll
going
have to still,
further.
we'll
yeah.
still have to cross that gas line with the sewer line eventually. Not for the park, but eventually we'll have to.
Yeah.
More room to add 2 more food trucks there?
Food truck on,
On that, on, concept 3?
Do 6.
there's
yeah.
room, yeah.
6 is the.
6 is the preferred.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. I mean, so what we can do is look at that space as overflow parking. And so in most of the times it will be parking, but we'll make sure it's big enough to accommodate 6 trucks. We can do that. Yeah.
So, I like concept 3 the best as well, but could you take like the concept 1 on the west side where the amphitheater and all the parking is? Sorry, east side, and move that, and, cause I think it's a better look, I think it's more, so we took concept 1 and morphed it into concept 3 a little bit, at least the parking and the area, the amphitheater would be a lot better. You can still do the trees, in concept 3 towards the back, like the area I'd like to call chili, right there. But, it looks like a chili anyways, but if you just morph that, because if you look at concept 3 out, the amphitheater is, I don't know.
I was gonna say a similar thing, I think,
Yeah.
Chad,
And the
is
parking,
not
just
the
the
rounded
double,
parking, but
yeah.
the double parking and extend the lawn.
Yeah,
Not
extend the
bring
lawn out.
Bring the lawn back with the flat parking.
So if you
Do
took,
concept 2, yeah, concept 2
So
parking.
Concept 2's parking.
On
and
number
I know you'd have to
3.
redo the
I
trails, I don't know
completely
how
agree.
prohibitive
It
that
takes
is.
up less
Yeah.
room in
But
that.
the lawn from 2 and the parking from 2 with 3.
yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we are hoping, because what we assumed is that there's pieces, it's like a kit, pieces
Yeah.
from each one that we're gonna put into that final. So if you like, what we're hearing is you like the parking of this one, you like the lawn of this one, you like the west side of this one.
So Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong, just really quick, so those concepts that you guys are discussing, I love it, I think it's great discussion. I think this one had 127 parking spots, so retroing it back to the second one, I think you may wind up losing 10 to 12, something in that area.
It's 124 on concept 2, I thought, 134 on concept.
Yeah,
so
it was,
maybe 10.
it was about 10 spots. So what we will do though, when we convert where K is right now into overflow, you're gonna gain your 10
Right.
spots back.
Who's writing this down? 'Cause I'm losing track.
Melinda's writing it down.
Concept
They
3,
recording?
You got it
the
written.
side,
Okay.
the west side, all that on the west side of the river with the courts and everything, but then on the east side, I
Concept
thought,
2.
yeah, I thought concept 2 and 1, like morphing 2 and 1 together.
Do you like, oops, this just got on me here. Do you like,
So is that keeping the native trees, is that what you're going for?
This one.
I don't know, I don't know how much, Yeah,
getting the splash pad away from there.
yeah. I can't tell which ones are native.
This is all native crap
Oh,
right
gotcha.
here.
Right on the streets.
I see it now, yeah.
Yeah, so concept three takes out all that.
Okay, 3 loses all of it. There's none of
It's
that
not
left.
here, it's
Oh, gotcha.
nice.
Yeah, so concept one
I like
is
this too.
middle ground as far as the tree removal.
I like
It
three,
keeps a
except for
swath
this.
there.
Except for this.
Um, concept two has the most being kept, and concept three has the least.
And we need at least 6 for.
As long as it's not a cost issue, removing the trees isn't,
Big cost.
doesn't add a lot of cost.
Pre-mesquite,
There's some cost to add the trees.
sorry.
I'll say
Right.
anything on number 3, if you guys wanna ask.
I just like three, even the layout on the
I like,
west side, but
I do too.
just the parking from number 2 and extend the lawn of the.
Basically,
Yeah.
everybody's saying west side of 3, and then on the east side, concept 2 is preferred for parking and lawn.
Yeah,
And I think what we can do is if you like, so concept two has the amphitheater that's kind of skewed. If you like the amphitheater more kind of symmetrical, I guess, on the, like this one, we can put lawn down
Right.
there
facing
also.
the more west though.
So, yeah.
So the bathroom.
I have a few questions as far as the pickleball courts go.
Sure.
And I think there's
Glad
one
you're not
right
listening.
there too.
I don't care about pickleball courts, they're not my.
How many courts are we talking about?
Four.
Four.
So that's-
Yes.
This is 3,
So,
so there, and I think.
That's what, a maximum of 16 players at a time.
We need one.
Okay, so you don't need much parking lot for that. Could you design a parking lot south of the court there, like a
Yeah.
10 parking spot lot? I mean, that's all you need, right?
That's only 4.
That drops off really quick right there, that's a big slope, if you look at that.
Oh, south of the courts there?
Right south of the court.
Yeah, south of the court.
Okay, so my other question would be, as far as the pickleball courts, could they ever be moved to the east of D?
The space was a tight in there for the ramadas that we know the public wants around there, so that's where we kept it pretty far south, just because of the footprint they take up.
Get 4 courts.
It just
Space
gets
gets
really
big.
tight, yeah, it gets really
Also wanna
tight.
keep 'em close to the restroom, or they'll be using something besides the restroom.
So in this case, you know, if we look at, this is the one that has the 6 food truck options, so this is about as big as where the food truck area would be. We're gonna convert that now into parking. So the parking, if you look at kind of how this is set up, it's pretty close to those pickleball courts. So it'll give you that better access when we do that conversion.
The other thing to keep in mind too is with that idea and concept of putting parking, it's gonna be right there in a major intersection change, so you don't wanna be trying to move traffic close to that when they're coming and going. So I think it's better to avoid it and push it up and let them come down into the, yeah.
Just a quick question, as far as the infrastructure for the food truck court, there's no bathroom in this drawing, correct? So it's
In-
basically just power, because they need
Correct.
50 amps roughly
Correct.
per spot.
Yes.
So that can pretty much go anywhere as long as it's kind of somewhere where there's a parking lot kind of
Correct.
close. So if it was over, and I'm not trying to change everything around, but we keep talking about using the food truck court as a additional parking for the pickleball. I don't know, let's just make that a parking lot, then to move the food court over here on the other end of the other parking lot. If there's no restroom needed or anything else, it's basically just
On the east side
water.
of D?
Yeah.
So along Discovery Park?
Yeah, I mean, then people can come in and park and enjoy that. That's kind of its own separate event, if you're gonna go see food trucks, right? I mean, that's easy access. Well, they're,
You got people over there in the food trucks in an
Mhm.
event, and you can go all the way back over to the restroom.
right, well, the only restroom is up there at the other end on that one, right?
And the food truck,
Oh.
and
So
the
we're-
food truck
yeah.
employees are gonna wanna use the restroom too.
Oh, yeah, no, I know.
Right?
Yeah, on 3 is, this is, so as thinking forward to the master plan, I think the restrooms are gonna be pretty similar to what's shown here, where there would be one right close to the bridge and then one associated with the splash pad. So we looked at the food truck court on the east side of the wash, but went ahead and moved it to the west because of some of the drainage concerns that we had, just, you know, if there is more infrastructure that we put with those, we didn't want it to be impacted. If we leave it as just a parking lot, it certainly could be on that side, but we were thinking if there was an event where there wasn't something going on in the amphitheater, but maybe you were having a community gathering that was associated with some of the open lawn, the play space, and if you wanted food trucks there, it has the better access. So it just was a balance between how you're gonna use it, if you think the food trucks will really be there just for big events, or if you think there will be food trucks for other activities that take place at a community park. So that was the reason that we kept it on that side, to have flexibility and allow for, you know, non-event use of food trucks.
Right, I guess it's just how it ends up looking. I mean, if it's like flush mouth receptacles and all that, rather than sticking up like a typical pull in and plug in kind of thing, how do you make it look? If it looks like a parking lot, people use it as a parking lot. So, cause the pickleball, I still see them parking along 8th right there, unless it's fenced. Because people are lazy and they're just gonna park where it's easiest to park, unfortunately. I mean,
Sure.
so
And
we
we'll,
might as well
we'll-
factor that in,
Yeah,
the lazy factor.
we appreciate that feedback, because we can look at more parking kind of south. You know, to your point, if it's just receptacles, we could put them in both spots. Honestly, I think we'd want to look at the drainage, but, you know, we'd want to just make sure that we're not causing any issues. But there, if that's as simple as it is, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's flexibility there. I think the big question is, what all do you envision the food trucks being there for? Is it just when the amphitheater's gonna be used? Or is it like Rebecca said, are you just gonna have food trucks there on a Saturday when families are gonna be playing in the park and they're gonna wanna have their kids using the facility there?
Movie nights and stuff.
Yeah, I would think they would be there quite frequent.
Hopefully.
And I guess,
Yeah.
Tim, to your other point, just why I'm sitting here thinking about it, right? So if that's a concern and we're like, hey, look, to access everything off 8th Avenue, we can look at a sidewalk and curb and gutter on there. Obviously, it's just the cost trade-off and everything else, but we could put something in there where it's physically on the other side.
Then that would be good.
Well, they are doing sidewalk curb and gutter on 8th Avenue on our side of the road.
So we're gonna do it anyway, then it'll be full.
Okay.
And you're talking about having outlets for the food trucks? Or are you talking about them plugging into the Spider where there's a big box centrally located where they can come to, and it's picked up afterwards? You're not talking about an outlet for each one, are you?
Either way.
Yeah, it can be either way. We could,
I even-
that part's a detail that we can figure out what's best
If
use.
it's gonna be a dual use parking lot, I would say you have one master box, you
Yeah.
spider box.
Yeah.
And they can spider to the main, like the yellow box they all plug into, cause I can't picture supplying 100 amps to each food truck.
Most food trucks have their own power anyway.
Yeah, they'll have to
A lot of them have
supplement
the
it,
generators.
they'll have to supplement it a little bit.
Yeah, we're flexible on that. I think, whatever is the most beneficial to how you all see it's gonna be used, we can plan for that.
How big are your food truck spaces?
Do you know how big they were?
No, it was 20, I don't remember off
Okay.
the top of my head though.
Okay. We can get you that answer specifically.
I'm just thinking of like what's sitting at Tractor Supply on the weekends. They stay hooked to their truck because their generator's in the truck.
Mhm.
And they become, 75 feet long.
Well,
Sure.
Big Tex, they actually have another trailer with a separate freezer too. So they bring in multiple. If it's a big event, they'll have their food truck, a separate trailer that has actual freezer in it too, for reefer, whatever it is, but it's a separate one.
Just on this plan, I'm like, they're gonna have to get there early and back in and get situated
Yeah.
before anybody else shows up, and they can't even use that space.
What is helpful is the desire for 6. If that's the desire, we'll make sure that we're spatially planning for that in this area. And we'll get into that design and more heavily. Do you think 6 is enough? That's still the goal?
And I think,
I would think 6 would
I
be,
Okay.
think
that's
that's
personal.
plenty, 'cause
Okay.
we don't,
Yeah, there's
we
only
never see more than 6.
5 in town.
4 or 5
Okay.
is all we see. I mean, realistically, we don't see that many.
We'll plan for the
They're all not
6.
gonna be able to come every
Right.
event, so.
Although I think if we have space for them, you might even see more wanna make sure that part of the concept is that we will have events there, so if you have a flea market or you have, some type of, I don't know, any kind of food court of any type, that there is some larger areas that people can get under there as well, and so we wanna have some larger lots to cover some of those things as well.
How many?
And I did want the chief to chime in a little bit, just in case, because one of the issues is, as we're talking about, you know, this idea of parking, along the street, I did want to get some feedback, just on the overall layout and any kind of issues with law enforcement in terms of, you know, pockets where people may gather, that kind of thing, so, the chief hasn't been part of our planning, so I did want him to have an opportunity to chime in.
I just have two questions. I think one might be, have been addressed as for the splash pad, probably fencing. That's definitely, because you have Heath Avenue right there.
Yeah.
It's definitely gonna need some fencing away for those kids.
And the launch.
The other thing is from, emergency vehicle access on that. If you're gonna have people out, say, in the bandstand or in the lawn sphere, if you're gonna be able to get, say, an ambulance in there, if you have an ambulance. So being able to have access, at least access to get into those areas.
Just a question on that. So if we have, if we have access through the upper part of the cemetery now, if we just don't like a staircase or something up where you, where it's accessible on that, is that considered?
I'm thinking more along the lines of medical emergencies for an ambulance, where you're gonna have to get medical personnel, attorneys, equipment, things like that in there, so. Just as long as they have access maybe along, say, the walking path, or if that bridge is able to support.
I think we wanna over-design the bridge to be vehicle access, but like talking to Tad over the band guys over here, if we made that pathway down the wash 12 feet wide and access to the stage, that would be access to the stage.
Those are kind of the two main concerns I would see on that. So.
Great, and
And lighting, of course.
And that's the other thing we really haven't talked a lot about is lighting.
Well, in three, I think three was the, well, no, this goes back to the choices on the pickleball courts. They chose the shaded, pickleball courts but we could still have lighting as well.
of course,
Right,
yeah, so lighting is,
Mixing the,
absolutely, lighting is a given on this site. We will have lighting.
I
We'll
figured.
make sure it's dark sky compliant, but
Right.
we need lighting, security lighting and all of that, so there will be lights. We can talk about level of lights and how we want it to be used, but we'll have some lights.
So I guess a question back to Ryan, right? I think going down this road, is that, like, there was an active shooter, is there any code or regulation about, are we kind of people in that corner or anything, or what is it?
So for this kind of violent situation, active shooter, basically is where people can go to either secure in place or basically escape. So that's why you gotta have the access points. He's talking about the bridge, where you can get a massive amount of people out all at once.
So we make it out.
Right, I mean, and, yeah, I mean, and I've been out there on the walking path. I mean, there's, if you put, you know, like we're talking about the trees up that hill, there's tons of places for people to go.
Well, to your point, KB, we had a staircase going up into the cemetery just for another access point.
Be a really cheap version of
Yeah.
an escape route.
Just ingress, egress.
would you be okay with people parking in the cemetery to access the site?
I would be, when that's as a part of this.
They're going to regardless.
Let's just say they're going to
Make it a
anyways.
parking or not, but
With an access drive.
uh, 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 I think that would be smart to even maybe a low wall that they could pull up to on that edge of that, I'm gonna call it a mesa, it's not, but. And then even if you had to, I don't know what that takes, 50 feet, 70 feet to do that, but then you might even put a wall to kind of, so that if somebody's using it in the daytime, your cemetery is not having to hear it and see it, I don't know. But I think that access from the cemetery to the bandstand, even if it's a cutout in the cemetery to get the slope right, so that you can circle it with your pickup, drop your stuff off and get back out, might be easier and do what you're talking about for an ambulance. Put a crash gate there or something so they can open it for an event. I'd leave it where you can walk down it and it's. I mean, walk down it, but not drive down it. You don't want ATVs and people want to try and drive down there. I think a couple bullards would, well, I don't know.
We can look at that access there, for
Well, that may be where we need two bridges too.
Pretty narrow up there in the cemetery too. Every night when I go lock the cemetery bathrooms, there's sometimes people park and you can't even get through the road because somebody parks right in the middle of the road to go walk the path. So one vehicle could limit anything happening in there.
I need to go walk it and see how we.
Just a point on the lighting. I know that our walking path right now around the cemetery is lit, because a lot of people like to use it when it's cooler and it's darker, and because of the employment opportunities around here, they're on shifts where they do stuff late at night. So having that incorporated with the area that goes around the walking path there.
I agree.
Well, I like getting rid of some of the mosquitoes down there because of snakes too.
You mean all of them?
Ted tells me he doesn't like.
He's after all of them.
I'd like to bring up, concept 3 for the play equipment. So, I like concept 3 for the splash pad being separate from the pickleball courts. And then, but I think it might be a good idea to maybe move J, the fit core, back up like in concept 1, just so that we have all of the play equipment in the same area. And then the parking, part D, that upper half, north half of the parking would mostly be used for play equipment, and maybe the older people would go down into the pickleball courts, but also to just, contain the kids, so we can put a nice fence in some way,
Got it.
so that there's not all that traffic around that curve.
Sure.
You're talking keeping them closer together?
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause we got 4 kids and 1 mom too.
Yeah.
So splitting them makes, it's kinda hard. I thought, how you gonna split mom? They gotta keep an eye on them, so I see what you're saying, Nora.
But the safety issue with the fence, so just having all of the play equipment in one area would probably be easier to keep them all corralled.
Sure, that makes sense.
One of
And
the points of conversation that we had before is just keeping at least the little kids' play area and the teens a little bit separate so that they're.
Yeah, not so close.
And we can, there's quite a bit of room as you're looking at this, so we can provide them in the same area, but still make sure there's some separation so that, you don't have them right on top of each other.
Another point for the access to the playgrounds, I do wanna make sure that it is accessible to all. That
Yes.
It's inclusive and that there's not rocks and dirt that you're having to ride wheelchairs over and stuff like that, that it's a firm foundation. Maybe if it could be either like the plexi rubber or something like that.
Absolutely, yeah, so this playground is intended to be that inclusive play space, so it's meant to be accessed by anyone. So all the concepts are absolutely intending for it to be fully accessible.
Awesome.
And the splash pad will need to be fenced no matter what, so for sure, it is a recirculating system, so we're gonna have to make sure it's fenced, and we won't have dogs on it and things like that.
Have you looked at putting any additional parking north of the splash pad? When I just look at concept 3, there's actually a pretty good spot there.
Good swath up there.
Couldn't-
Concept 3, maybe like a one-way parking lot that you could put.
Yeah, that's a good
That would be
idea.
great.
Is that fun?
Especially if
Yeah,
we can
there's
move that
space,
there
there is
too.
space.
Yeah.
We
Draws a lot of people.
can look at that.
Would you be okay with either parallel parking or
Well, I was just
backing,
thinking,
back out
I was
parking?
thinking like a one-way.
Everything else.
Where you just have one-way slanted on one side, so it's gonna be pretty narrow. I'd hate to have them backing out, I just hate that, I think that's gonna be pretty easy going. But anyways, if there's room there.
Get as many
12,
parking as we
15
can,
spots or
yeah.
something for the splash pad itself.
I think when we look at kind of where K is and really expanding that parking down, we're gonna get
Yeah.
a good amount back in there. And on this one, if we move J up, so say, it's basically gives a lot more room for parking down that whole side.
Mr. Brahma, where's your, cornhole tournament?
Oh, there'll be an F in a few years.
Okay. I kinda thought so.
You got a lot of lawn also.
Yeah, there's a lot of lawn here.
He's been thinking about that the whole time.
You could also do it in the big ramadas, right? It would fit. Cornhole
These are
tournament.
pretty big ramadas, yeah, so what we're showing are some pretty big structures that we can, when we get into costs, we can
I
look at
mean,
how that works.
The food truck one is as big as the amphitheater.
Exactly, there you go. It's big. How do you know how
To
big it is?
bring up his point, one thing we looked at that original meeting was, pickleball courts with shade, and then on the other side, maybe an artificial turf area where you could do cornhole on the backside of those shades where those trees are at. Just do a long, narrow.
Little strip
artificial
along,
strip
yeah,
turf where we
yeah.
could have some more, and they could just do cornhole and have the shade multi-use, whether it's for pickleball or. It'd just be on
That would
it'd
be
on
like-
the west side of that F there,
The
just on the
trees.
west side of those shades.
Yeah, where those trees are right now.
That'd be nice.
Write it down.
Then they're gonna have to walk and play cornhole too.
And you have to carry your stuff.
No, we're gonna have parking down there. It's gonna be a
And then they
parking
gotta listen to
area.
the kids play pickleball while they play corn.
Yeah.
But right now where those trees are on the backside of those shades, that would be,
Yeah.
would be at least 5%. You could put up 4 cornhole sets or something.
Sure. Yeah, the game area was one of those features that was, of interest, and we want to make sure we're taking into account that somewhere on the site.
One other detail we did talk about that, didn't get brought up was maybe putting fans under the ramadas, like a big giant fan.
Okay.
You can call it what they are.
I know what they're called.
They call it a big ass fan, that's what I call it.
I know what they're called. I got it.
That's the name of it. Look it up.
That's the name. That's for real. I got it.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Legitimate name.
Apparently that's the name of the company,
It's
okay.
the legitimate name of the
That's a
family.
BAF.
Rated for the whole.
Yeah.
Because I get things mixed up. That one's a BAF.
If you wanna see one in use, just walk into Napa and it
Works awesome.
Great.
Cool, cool.
Keep all those like flags.
It's just giant blades, yeah.
Yeah, because
They put some up under the old racing where the fairgrounds. is.
At the
Like
balance
removes
bands and
some,
stuff, yeah.
Moves the air around a little bit.
Yeah.
County is. Do you think you could do it?
I think we can
Or is it big edge fence?
do all three that are being
I think so.
one, and I think it's pretty clear in the specs.
So any other feedback?
The big ass fan.
Anything anybody has? Because at this point, I think what, and again, I'm not trying to wrap it up, but I mean, I think we're talking about concepts to kind of take what we discussed tonight and bring it back as one concept that we can show and see what everybody thinks of the new version. I mean, there's the basic part about using the west side of 3 and the east side of 2, plus some of these additional discussions that we just had about grouping up the equipment and things of that nature. So I think we can bring back one concept more and take a look at that and send it out and review it again, maybe in a normal work session setting. And again, if there's more feedback,
I just don't want us to forget that this heat will go away and there'll be a part of the year when a lot of this won't be usable the way we're looking at it. So, like the pickleball, I mean, that's gonna be busy first thing in the morning and then not all summer long. But then in the wintertime, it might be busy in the middle of the day and not in the morning. Same way with your splash pad. I don't know when it's gonna get its use, whether it's even gonna get turned on in the winter. I don't know. But if we build it based on the temperature when we came in here today, it's not gonna get the same use as if we had the same meeting in December. Just, just throw that out there so that when you're trying to make sure you have parking for this thing, that other thing gonna need it at a different time, so.
I think that's a really good point. I think there is a danger of over-parking because we're taking up a lot of space when it's not all gonna be happening at the same time. So that's a really good comment. I think your comment also about thinking about the splash pad is not gonna be in use all the time, and in this option, it's in its own area. It's not a central piece, so if it's not being used, it's not gonna stand out as a vacant space in the middle of the park. So those are some of the things that we can take into account when we're doing that final design and thinking about how it's used. And the other thing is this can't all be built at one time based on the budget that we have. So we wanna make sure we have a good plan. And then we will come back to figure out how it's gonna work with the budget that you have and the pieces that are built so that it looks like a complete park, regardless of how, you know, some of the extra amenities, are placed in the end.
I don't know how many events we intend to have, maybe, you know, if we figure one a weekend, that's 50. But that's weekends, but all week, somebody's gonna wanna use this for something else, so they just gotta work both ways, and I see some of it designed toward there being an amphitheater going on and food trucks going on, and at that time, there's some other stuff that won't be being used. I don't know how you juggle all that, but.
That's why I don't wanna lose the smallness too, so the citizens can go there and use these ramadas for the people that have a family of 40 to have their birthday parties and things, because they don't right now.
Right.
And they do need a place like that, the smaller get-togethers. And the other thing I didn't know, and I was gonna see about staff, if some of our committee here needed to get with staff and they take them out there so they can physically see where some of this is and what they're talking about, what Lance talking about, you're talking about, and see the drainage. If you, I didn't know if the manager could make that available if anybody
Yeah, we can do that.
needed to do that.
Yeah, I ride it every day.
Yeah.
I ride the trail, and she
Okay.
walks it, I see her out there too, but yeah, I'm pretty familiar with it. I see when it's wet, but we should all go look together, definitely.
Yeah.
I think
See
staff
why-
went out in the beginning with Rebecca and some folks, and they walked it, so it's something we could set up.
Yeah, Mr. Lopez, probably anytime, whoever
Yeah.
wants to.
Yeah, I know I can tag along with you, 'cause, but I didn't know if anybody else at different times, so we could see what you're talking about and why you're angling it this way and your drainage and
I
stuff
can
like
promise you
that.
by the end of our visit, you're gonna be a believer in number 3.
Yeah, is that one, that might be your favorite.
So-
I was hoping that was out there.
I have one last question. How soon is too soon to get rid of all those salts or whatever those little bushes are? Because I'd love to see, you know, you show some progress, but you don't want to do it too far in advance, but then people can really visualize the size of that, because that's a big piece of land right there.
So I'm with you, we can look at something like that, we can look at the timing. The one thing we don't wanna do is just expose a bunch of dirt and dust out there.
Right.
So we're gonna hold off as long as we possibly can, so we don't create too much chaos out there, so.
And we were thinking of creating a volunteer day for the committee to go out and do that work. So we'll supply all the wheelbarrows and all the tools and everything.
I got a loader right there at the house. I've worked at it across on
Get
the
some water.
bike trail there, doing cleanup, so I'm happy to do it.
I have a backhoe, I'm good.
So.
Careful what you
where are
wish
we
for,
at?
John.
Hey, if we get all that work done for free, we can put some more amenities out there. Just
I
don't
guess
take
along
out
those
the
lines,
gas.
right, you're planning on going to bid, I thought it was sometime early spring, summertime,
Yes,
so.
yeah.
We'll revisit that probably early part of next year.
Okay.
See if we can start sure.
And none of these things can be built by the city of Sanford?
Right,
Our own
there's a
crew?
contract way, and-
That's why we're gonna look at budget stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna get into budget.
What we wanna do ourselves, so that'll come with
Okay.
that master plan.
Yeah, absolutely, we'll look at all opportunities.
I'm sure they kind of will be involved in your lighting planning on where they would like things. And I don't know if they'll put it in, but figure out where the lighting will be. Because that is pretty important.
The camera systems too, that you put it in the other parks, that made a huge difference on
We got
a lot of that
our
destruction.
camera and the Wi-Fi and
Yep.
things like that, so, do you have a time frame on when we're meeting again and stuff? I know I thought we did.
Yeah, so, our thought is that we're gonna go back with these comments, we're gonna revise this into one plan, and then we can come back to you guys, I mean, honestly, within a month, whenever the next, you know, probably about a month time frame to come back and show you what that master plan looks like.
Is that pretty good with everybody?
So it's probably, we're looking at first meeting in September, probably. second meeting in August, we canceled because of the conference.
And if we have some changes, we contact you.
Yeah, so our next meeting, we're gonna show it to you, and you will have the opportunity to comment and let us know if there's more changes. And our schedule had the final master plan kind of starting into that preliminary design in around October timeframe. So we have from now until then to really
Right.
refine.
I'm obligated to talk through to staff and stuff like that, but the committee, can they talk to you?
Sure, we have bi-weekly meetings, so we are in touch every other week.
Okay.
So comments and things that come in, let us know. We need, just a couple weeks to prepare this next iteration. So maybe within the next couple weeks, if you have other things that come up.
And probably if you have comments, why don't you send them to me, and then I can channel them down to staff and to, and then if we wanna schedule something with the committee again and go over some of the details, we can. But, council, committee, pull them through my office, and then we can filter them down from there. And if we wanna have another, again, if we do it at a work session during the council meeting, come back with those comments incorporated, I think we're getting pretty close, so hopefully that will be sufficient.
Well, I don't know if the chair of the committee has something she'd like to
Is that
add or.
any more things than other than tonight? Is that what you're talking about? If anything else comes up more than tonight?
Yeah,
Is there-
again, if
okay.
there's certain things you wanna emphasize, or you think of something, send it in, and then we can try and incorporate it. I would say, though, if you have comments, there has to be a cutoff, so hopefully, if you think of something by the end of the week, then it'd be great to have those comments. But, again, it's never too late, depending on what the idea is, but I think we flushed out a lot of things, but again, for the sake of trying to have a cohesive design, it would be great if we'd have comments by the end of this week, since it's fresh in everybody's mind. And again, if there are any last minute changes, we can still talk about those if we need to.
And kind of John's point right there, right? Just remember you're going through it, right? Whether we put a 50 amp or a 40 amp service or 20 or whatever, we'll get into that level of detail when we get into
Yeah.
the final engineering. This is conceptual layout, part flow, all of that stuff, so don't feel like you have to get too far into the weeds.
And we have a review of this meeting at our Thursday meeting.
Yes.
So if you have any ideas between now and then, it's on our agenda already to review this meeting.
Well, then you thinking we're moving on?
I think so, unless anybody has any additional comments. Again, this is, kind of a good opportunity to provide feedback, so I don't wanna truncate it. I wanna make sure everybody, if they have an idea, put it out there now so we can incorporate it.
Except number 3. No, I don't think number 3 too.
Well, you get the mesquite trees
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. I know, the fire department will end up with mesquite trees. That's all right, but, okay, so
And again, I think that.
everybody comfortable with what we're going, we're moving on? We know you got access, which you guys got more power than me, I know that, so. Well, I guess we can move on to, item 8, announcement of current events. Request for anything, going to number 9, request for anything on the agenda.
I had one other issue I wanted to cover tonight, which was utilizing our naming policy. Does council want to ask the committee to go through a process, maybe to do some naming? Do you want to task them with trying to come up with a name for the park?
I was hoping we could involve the whole community.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
Again, I'm saying, do you want the committee to take the lead, or do you want council? Because if you want the community to be involved, maybe the committee takes the lead on reaching out to the community. It's up to you. I just figured I would raise that issue since it's on.
Well, since it's brand new and we barely put it in place, as a council, I'd just soon keep my hands on it until
Okay.
we figure out what we're doing.
Okay, no, that's fair. I just thought I would raise it now since
Yeah.
we're doing this.
Because I'm not sure we're clear on what guidance we would give to the committee at this time, so.
Well, you don't have to do it tonight. I'm just saying, let's think about the naming and what process you might want to use.
Heck, they might have a fundraiser on gathering the name.
Well, none of it's gonna matter, because Gabe's gonna tell you what he wants, and then we're all.
This committee will be involved somehow.
We discussed it.
Concept tree
Quite
park.
a bit.
I think we should name it Graveyard Park. That's,
Okay,
Mesquite Park.
keeps us
so,
alive.
that-
Gabe's favorite tree
Go
park.
in Mesquite Park 3.
So that's something you may have on a future agenda item.
All right, well, I just wanted to raise the issue because now it's in place, so I just wanted to remind you that we did.
Pickleball park.
Anything
But that was just me saying, there's still four
No,
other
that's fine.
people here.
Fine, and it'll give us time to give it some thought, and we can get some feedback. We've got time, it's not like we have to name it now.
Okay, so are we moving for a motion of adjournment
So made.
first?
Second.
Second? All those in favor? That's it. Oh, I missed it.